So we're in the eighth chapter of Gittin. We're engaged with the question of how the get is delivered, how the bill of divorce is going to be delivered. And we've learnt two principles that it has to enter at some level the domain of the wife. In other words, I mean, if she owns a house, it can enter her house. It can enter her personal space. He can hand it to her, but it has to enter her domain, and she has to be conscious that it has entered her domain. She needs to be awake. She needs to know, and she needs to know this is a get. It's not a bill. It's not a debt document. It's not a betrothal document. It's a divorce document. So she has to be conscious, and it has to enter her domain. And the Mishnah brought the example of someone who threw a get to his wife, either in when she was standing in her space, maybe that's less problematic, or perhaps if she's standing in the public space. And of course, what happens if it lands halfway between them? Well, has it entered her domain or not? And the Mishnah is now going to explore the parallels with a, an ordinary debt document. In other words, an ordinary loan document, or for that matter, a betrothal. So this might be a document of betrothal, or it might be money for betrothal. And the Gemara is going to rely on a verse which we've seen before, but it's worth revisiting. It's the core. We're going to read these verses pretty in the next about 3 weeks actually in Devarim. It's from the Parsha of Kitei. Seveyat Ami Beitor. After the divorce, she goes out of his house. V'halacha v'hayta ish acher, and she can go and she can be another man's wife. And the Gemara learns from this the juxtaposition of going out but being another man's wife, that there are parallels between divorce and betrothal. Many of the halachot which apply to divorce apply to betrothal. And we'll see, for example, that the laws of agency which we've discussed a lot in the tractate of Gittin, are re-articulated in the tractate of Kiddushin, in the tractate of betrothal, which comes next. And now the Mishnah, having talked about this idea that, a man could just throw the bill of divorce, the Mishnah now wants to explore, well, okay, how does that work with other kinds of documents? And so it jumps in. Similarly, the same principles apply with issues of betrothal or issues of debts. So the same principles of entering her domain and her being conscious, by the way, apply to those documents. So let's take an example. Amar lo bar chovo. So a man's creditor said to him, Zrok li chovi, throw me my debt. And he means, by the way, throw me the repayment of my debt. Throw me a sum of money. Uzrakolo, and he threw it. Karov la, he threw it. By the way, I presume that if it reaches the creditor, there is no argument. Absolutely no argument. But if he throws it and for some reason it doesn't reach the creditor, at this point, we are going to have an argument as to who's responsible. We don't have reliable money transmission in the time of the Mishnah. So if he throws this sum of money and it doesn't reach the creditor, well, okay, who is going to be responsible for the money and for the debt? And so the Mishnah continues. Uzrakolo, he threw it. Karov la malove, if it lands nearer to the creditor, Zacha halove, the borrower is credited. If it lands basically nearer to the lender, then the borrower is going to be credited, i.e., the borrower is considered to have paid off his debt. Karov la love halove chayav. If it lands nearer to the borrower, so he throws it, but he doesn't make it halfway even, the borrower is still obligated. Haloveh chayav. The borrower is obligated until the lender's repaid. Machzah lemachzah shnehem yacholoku. If it's halfway, halfway, then they can divide it. Remember, we learnt that if the bill of divorce lands halfway, halfway, then the wife is in an indeterminate state. The halakha is that she's both divorced and not divorced. We don't know what her situation is, but in terms of financial obligations, of course, you can split. Shnehem yachalohu. What if what if they're in different domains? I tell Merit Barosha, Gaguz Rakola, what's she's standing up on a roof and he throws it up to her. So it is going to enter her domain, but at a certain point in time. Uzrakola, he throws it up to her. Kevan shehigia la'avir hagag harez u'mogareshet. As soon as it reaches the air of the roof, she's divorced. In other words, we are presuming, by the way, she's standing on her roof. She must be standing on her roof. As soon as it reaches the airspace of that roof, i.e., when it enters her domain, she's considered to have received the document, just as much as when a legal document is served at the legal address of the company for whom it's intended. They're considered to have received the document once it's served at their address. So she's considered to have received the bill of divorce once it's, if you like, reaches her domain. So maybe he's above and she's below. So he's on the roof and she's below. Again, she must be in her own domain. Uzrakola, and he throws it to her. Gag. As soon as it leaves the space of the roof, now this is very interesting. Venimchak onisraf. It was erased or burnt. So let's carry on with the Mishnah. Harez or Mogoreshet, she's divorced. As soon as it leaves the space of the roof, she's divorced. And we've always said that the Mishnah likes edge cases. So we're going to ask, well, maybe it's left the space of the roof. Before it actually reaches her, it's erased or burnt. Maybe it falls into water. Maybe it falls into fire. But the Mishnah is clear that it takes effect once it enters her domain, not when it reaches her hand. So even if it falls into fire or water, even if after it enters her domain, it's immediately erased or burnt, the Mishnah still rules that she's divorced because the crucial element here is that it's served in her domain rather than served into her hand. That's the crucial point which the Mishnah wants to emphasize. And the Mishnah then goes on to talk about timing. So does the handover of get have to be contiguous in time with the writing of the get? Of course, the writing of the get is the act that carries. It's gonna carry witnesses. It's gonna have a date. You know, the writing of the get is the action that has a documentary reality. And Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel disagree. Beit Shammai omrim poter hu adam et ishto b'get yashan. Beit Shammai says a person can divorce his wife with an old get, a get that was written some time before. How far before? We'll have to find out. Uveit Hillel osrin, and Beit Hillel forbid. We don't really understand what an old get is, but the Mishnah is going to ask, Ve'ezehu get yashan, kol shenit yached imam echar shektavola. What is an old get? One where he was secluded with her after he wrote it. One where he was secluded with her after he wrote it. So he writes this get. He writes this get, but we learnt in the Mishnah in the 7th chapter, by the way. Let's just go back to the 7th chapter for a sec. 4th Mishnah of the 7th chapter. Lo tit yached imo ela bifnei edim afilu eved, etc., etc. After the get's been written, she shouldn't be alone with him, except in the presence of witnesses. And there's a dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. Is she regarded as married or not? But it seems clear that her status after the get's been written is indeterminate. And the rabbis are clearly anxious that if she becomes pregnant before the after the get is written and after the get is dated, but before it's delivered, then the status of the child might possibly be suspect or indeterminate. And that's why the Mishnah rules in chapter 7, by the way, ruling according to Beit Hillel that she can't be alone with him once this get has been written. Now, Beit Shammai, I think Beit Shammai assume we'll see this at the very end of the tractate that Beit Shammai assume that a man is only going to divorce his wife because of adultery. There's no other possible grounds for divorce. And in that case, of course, she's forbidden both to him and both to him and to the lover. So there's no question. There's no question of intimate relations. And maybe that's why Beit Shammai say, look, a man can divorce his wife with an old get. That Beit Shammai assume that as soon as the divorce process begins, she's already forbidden to him. Beit Hillel Beit Hillel forbid this. Beit Hillel permit divorce on many, many grounds. On the grounds that his soup. Well, we'll see in the last Mishnah of the tractate on the grounds that his soup is spoiled. So Beit Hillel are going to be anxious about the status of a child who's conceived after the get is dated, but before she receives it. And that's why they've just, if you like, in order to discourage any possibility that such a get might be used, they forbid the use of such a get completely. It's completely invalid.